My name is Felicity and I work for General Practice Alliance as a project manager, and I help pull together the Volunteer Passport online platform for Northamptonshire. And also presenting alongside me is Scott Jones. He's from 123internet, who will later just do a bit of a talk about how he developed our homepage. So I can't see anyone at the moment. So Scott, it's over to you. If anyone has any questions or wants to ask anything, then please put your hands up and shout, and I'll stop. But we've got time at the end to ask any questions as well. So I'll just do a bit of an overview. In the next sort of 20 minutes, we're going to cover the following sort of topics: why a redesign of the homepage was taken, what considerations we thought about, and how we achieved the redesign, and also what can be done within TeamKinetic, and also what Scott from 123internet can offer as well. So we'll go straight into it. I say that and my computer freezes. Ooh, there we go. Next page. Because has that come up all right, Scott?
Yeah, passport overview. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So so first, initially, I just thought it'd be quite good to give you a quick overview on the initial concept behind the Volunteer Passport and how we sort of came together. So in 2021, General Practice Alliance wanted to develop a new sort of workforce model to encompass volunteering and to bridge the gaps between sort of within Northamptonshire between accessing volunteers and supporting the local community groups. So we kind of knew the assets were already there available, but there was no way of bringing and sort of pulling them all together. And we kind of needed the additional support, especially in Northamptonshire with the restoration and the reset of the NHS, and also following on the back of the COVID pandemic. So that's sort of how we came about and how we found TeamKinetic. So they enabled us to create an online volunteer platform across Northamptonshire. And this allowed us to support all the volunteering roles, and we in turn then called it the Volunteer Passport. So in the first year, we developed the platform by working with the local voluntary sector. We produced handbooks and webinars for service providers, and we also created a data sharing agreement. We set up a DBS process, and we also partnered with Health Education England, which allowed us to enrol on their National Volunteer Certificate programme. So after we had set all that up, we ran a pilot and launched just within Northampton town, just to test the system. So this kind of took us over about 6 months to complete. And then our next stage was to look at how the home sort of page design would come together and see how different partnerships within Northamptonshire could help create different pathways for volunteers. So we first sort of looked at why a redesign was taken. So we wanted to bring everyone together in one centralized place for volunteering. So we brought together all our key stakeholders in Northamptonshire and held a workshop to understand what our key vision for volunteering was across Northamptonshire and how we can share this through the Volunteer Passport. We came up with the few following points. So our sort of main thing was progressing people to become volunteers and widening participation, to get more volunteers engaged and progressing towards the volunteer to career pathway, to use the Volunteer Passport platform to process volunteers and post roles and opportunities, to get more volunteers through the University of Northampton and to develop a volunteer to career pathway, and to increase capacity of voluntary sector across multiple stakeholders and develop shared learning, and then finally to seek and improve the mental well-being of volunteers. So once we have figured out what the shared vision was across our stakeholders, the next process was to look at our pathways, which is on the next slide. So what did we consider? We looked at the volunteer pathways and how the process works within Northamptonshire, and we realized we have 4 different pathway streams. So we've got the service users, so that's sort of be it for a family member or for themselves. We've got through different types of healthcare agencies. We've got lived experience, and then you've got the students who need volunteering to complete their studies, and then also the local community. So then we worked out what type of volunteers there are in the community. So people who want to volunteer just to give something back to their community. You've got people who want to volunteer to gain a career at the end of it, and then also to do it as part of being a student and part of their studies. So from this understanding, we then connected with the local Northamptonshire Healthcare Foundation Trust so we could offer a volunteer to career pathway. We also then connected with the local university through University of Northampton so we can track volunteering hours for their student modules. And then from this workshop, we had identified the need to refresh all the website design by going through these two processes. So our next step was to present this to the board to gain funding to do this. We've highlighted the importance of having a professional looking homepage for both sides of the offering, so for service providers or for people who want volunteers. And the board understood the importance, and funding was approved, which was great. So for the homepage design, we wanted to run a comms plan alongside this, with the main aim to launch the volunteer passport across Northamptonshire at the same time. So the main challenges were, when designing the website, is that we have a very small space to work with and have to get the message across in a very clear and concise way. So using layman terms and not confusing the message. So you have one chance to engage with people when they click on their website. So what we looked at the homepage design. So we considered how we could portray this information through the volunteer passport homepage to make it a centralised hub for Northamptonshire. Alongside this development, we pulled together a marketing plan to launch the passport across the whole of Northamptonshire as well. So the key points we wanted to cover in the homepage development were the following. So why volunteer? I think from looking at how all volunteering comes from, we wanted to make sure that this was the forefront of the website. So we kind of thought that it's giving something back from a lived experience. You're helping your local community, you're making new friends, you can build your self-esteem, learn new skills and add to your CV, and also gain experience of working in a professional setting. So we wanted to make sure we could get that across. Then what options are available for volunteers? So we determined that some volunteers just want to volunteer. Other volunteers want to have an option with a career at the end of it. And then finally, volunteers also want the option to become a student and also to complete volunteering for their studies. We also wanted to highlight the benefits for both the volunteer and service providers. And then finally wanted to show all the amazing resources we have across Northamptonshire. This is when we looked at the back end of TeamKinetic and realised we needed some help designing the homepage. So this is where Scott from 123 Internet came in, and I'll now hand over to him so he can chat you through the web design process.
Thanks, Felicity. Okay, so yeah, so my name's Scott Jones. I'm from a company called 123 Internet Group. So we're a digital agency, and we've worked with GPA for quite some time now on various projects. So when they approached us with this, it was a kind of obvious route for us really to sort of get involved. Really, from our side of things, we have quite a structured process when we look at the website design and build for various clients that we work with. We have a separate design and dev team for these reasons. For us, it really starts with the UX. It's understanding really the types of people and those personas of those people that are going to be accessing the website. Now, what was interesting with this particular project, that was so wide, we had to make sure that it was as simple as possible and as friendly as possible. Whilst also making sure that all the key messages were there, the routes to get into the system, obviously, of TeamKinetic and so on. So the platform itself obviously already existed. What our team were able to do was create, firstly, starting from a research, looking at various sites from a usability point of view, looking at examples maybe of sites that Felicity and team has sent across that they'd used previously with success. And then we went through and actually then created a flat design just from the homepage itself, but then also later in terms of some of the internal usage of those designs as well. We had some really good open comms, and very quickly sort of understood what we could and couldn't move around the screen, given it was a pre-built platform. Normally with our sort of websites, when we're looking at them as a whole, we start from the ground up and we can kind of create whatever we want. Where you deal with something like this that already has some rigid framework in place, it's how you change that and interact with that and how you can move it around the screen. So again, what we do, we start with design research for all these projects. We look at kind of, in terms of navigation, what's the most important thing that we want visitors to be able to see and then move into as quickly as possible. We go through that in terms of navigation. So sometimes I'm sure we all use websites where you're kind of hunting around for the one page you're trying to find or the one service you're trying to find. It gets really frustrating. So we kept it as simple as possible across the top menu system. Going on from there, we looked at usability. So what do we want those visitors to see? What's the key message? How much do we need to show them to gain their interest and set out what it is that they need to do? And then take them into those relevant pages or into those relevant actions. And the other thing we looked at was around the content and actually the calls to action. So what was important? What was that next step? what did we want to show the visitor, and what did we want them to do as the next step? Was it to make an inquiry, pick up the phone, and things like that? Felicity, if we can move on to the next slide.
Well,
I feel like I'm in the government. Next slide now. Yeah, so this was the overall look of the finished product of the homepage, and this went through, you know, a couple of variations in terms of how we wanted to kind of display this. So what we did, as you can see very clearly, it's badged obviously with the logo there, but we wanted to show a very clean, very crisp site, but using these sort of bright, impactful colors to gauge that interest. Across the top, you'll see some very clear navigation, so very simplified. So it's about us, find out a little bit more about the organization, who's behind it, get in touch, so being able to reach a contact page very quickly. Events, because events was a big push, looking at actually the events that are taking place and so on. The search criteria there is in place that you can actually find information from the site very quickly. So just by keyword search and things like that we put in place. And then the obvious things like login, register. And you'll also notice at the top right, there's a select language, which we use Google Translate for. So actually they can translate the site in real time into pretty much any language they choose. So if you've got someone who's been referred to the site that's come from, you know, from a different background, from a different country, speaking a different language, generally speaking, if they're already browsing in, let's say, French, for example, the system itself will detect the fact that they're browsing in the default language of French and translate the site automatically for them as well. So it's a lovely way of being able to have this wide access very, very quickly. You can see from the homepage there, we've kept things what we call on or below the page fold in terms of what we want them to do, and the key message above the page fold. So for those that don't understand it, it's basically if you split that screen there, it's generally everything above sort of 50–60% that you see first. So we wanted to make sure that we had that key message that they saw instantly. The pink writing you'll see there, the magenta writing there, just scroll across on the live site. And this is a way of giving them some further information that catches their eye and also draws their attention to the buttons, which is about try volunteering and obviously registering now. And obviously then talking about from a service provider point of view, adding the opportunities there as well. So again, this wasn't just a B2C kind of website, it was also B2B in terms of the service providers. And then below that, you've got the search opportunities there that you can jump straight into. There's other call to actions just on this screen quickly. So bottom left, you've got the typical cookie security side of things, which we do for most of our sites to make sure that people are at home, they trust the site. The site itself is a secure site, it's a HTTPS site. So again, anything that's very sort of forward facing, you need to make sure that people feel easy about doing it. Nobody would put credit card information in, for example, if it wasn't a secure site. But when we're talking about offering your information, making contact on this sort of nature, we wanted to make sure that that was safe. And in the bottom right, you've got a call to action there for Ask Us Anything. So it was about being very open, and the terminology we've used there is about being very open, asking them to sort of get in touch. Can move on to the next one, please, Felicity?
Sure.
So the other thing to bear in mind with any site these days, you know, most people I'm sure, you know, are using mobile phones to navigate sites these days, certainly when it comes to e-commerce and so on, and even making inquiries. So we wanted to make sure that although the framework was in place and the functionality was perfect for what it needs to do, we wanted to make sure that the design from desktop wasn't lost in translation into a mobile platform. So we actually went through, and all the design work we did in the UX was about how that would look and appear on a mobile phone. So you can see here that a lot of the information actually stacks. So where we talk about the nice graphics we have on the homepage, this actually stacks perfectly. So it lays out nicely on a mobile phone, and you simply scroll up and down to see the information. We included something called a hamburger menu, which is the 3 lines you normally see top right of sites and so on. This one we actually decided to put in the middle because of the functionality, to make sure that that would open up and people could just get to the right page very quickly. And we made sure that from a mobile point of view that the font was very clear, the right sizing, and actually from a mobile point of view, those call to action buttons resized and they could be led into the next page. So the actual journey itself was very easy for them to use. If you can do the next slide, please, Felicity.
Oh.
So parts of the site I've just kind of pulled out to kind of explain them in a little bit more detail. So again, this site was kind of looking at a range of parties and what we wanted them to do. So what we did, we actually went through the discussion with Felicity, understood the content and what we wanted to show to those visitors, and actually broke them down into certain stages. So we broke the content out rather than just seeing, wads of information and words. We broke them into sections, created an icon for them, gave them a graphic, so that you can actually drive into these areas very quickly just by sight. So are you a volunteer? Are you looking to volunteer to gain a career? Volunteer for my studies? It's very clear messages there. So we can segment those inquiries, if you like, and that journey for those people very easily. And again, using the text there, we use very clear, concise wording, so they knew what that section was about and whether it was going to talk about, the right things for them in particular. And again, very clear call to action buttons. It was about signing up. It was about giving information so they could take the next step. And if we could do the next slide. And again, with most sites, there's always generally processes involved. So for anything like this, where it is, quite an open topic, we wanted to explain to them how easy this process was going to be for them. So we use an infographic that we designed for Felicity and the team to explain this very simply. So you can see there on the homepage, this element in the top left, it talks to them about the process. It wasn't complicated. It's quite easy to do, and we wanted to make sure that we offered that to those people. So you can see here, you simply register, you apply for the roles, they go through the training modules, and DBS check obviously is carried out, and they start volunteering. It was as simple as that. And I think, displaying these messages, certainly when it comes to the homepage, is really important. People generally will not scroll too further than from the homepage. So if we can get all that information in a very nice, concise way, all of their questions and answers are kind of, fulfilled at that point, and you've got much more, choice for them to actually, start that process. The other thing obviously was making sort of icon-based call to actions as well. So with this, people do read obviously words and so on, but just by adding in nice graphics that's in keeping with the branding is a lovely way to kind of guide into that process. And again, bottom right, you'll see there sort of we broke that down into volunteer benefits and then the service providers. And again, we put that on the homepage for good reason, to explain the two different kind of audiences, first of all. And actually, we put very simply 4 bullet points against each one to expand on that information, so they had a clearer view of that. And again, within that, we've used what we call SEO friendly wording. So the wording for headlines, for example, get picked up by Google, and the information gets picked up by Google, obviously, in terms of actually listing the site and it being found more, not just by word of mouth or any internal marketing that might be happening. And next slide.
Back to me now.
Back to you. Perfect.
So thanks, Scott, for sort of giving the overview on how we pulled the website together. So just in conclusion, this is how far we've come from having not much of a website and wanting to sort of, I suppose, expand upon what TeamKinetic offer. So as you can see, the figures have jumped quite significantly pre-launch to post-launch. So that was done obviously with our marketing campaign as well, and also with the change of the website as well. So I hope you've enjoyed the overview of why sort of the homepage design is important today, and sort of what is required to make the TeamKinetic platform what we use to work for us. But I can stop sharing my screen now and answer any questions if there are any. Hi. Any questions from anyone at all?
I haven't got. I find that fascinating. I haven't got any questions though.
No questions. We've answered it all, Felicity.
That's it, done.
Yeah, you've done your job, you see. That's a sign you've done your job.
All completed, everyone. One of the two. Well, if you have anything, obviously go back to Steve and Alex and the team at TeamKinetic, and I'm sure they can put us in touch with if you want help.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah, no problem, no issues doing that. Well, thanks ever so much for that. That was really, really insightful. And because people sometimes ask me, which ones do you recommend? And your one is definitely going to be top of the list now. I clocked it before, and I was like, they've done a really good job of theirs.
Brilliant.
Okay, well, if there's no question, very useful. Thank you. No, I think just people just saying thank you to you.
Yeah, clean look of the site. I think the clean look is what really makes that sort of site really work well.
Yeah,
the sites can be overcomplicated when they really don't need to be, and sometimes the sites we modify or take over for companies, it's sometimes just stripping it back to the basics. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, we sometimes we're constantly in the process of doing that, because we have this kind of function creep, as we call it, the IT jargon for those who are not in IT.
Mm-hmm.
But you get, can you just get it to do X, Y, and Z? And you're adding things on over the years, just little bits here, little bits there. But then every now and again, you got to stop and say, okay, how do we bring all this in line? How do we bring an element of logic to this so everything's in the same logical place? Oh, we may have a question here. Yes, Matt. Yeah, it's Matt. I think you could just unmute your mic and just ask the question.
It's not a question. It's just to say that the more simple sites you create, or anything that you create for the volunteers, you must always keep in mind that some of the volunteers are English is a second language for them. It's very important to make instructions very clear, because number one, they will struggle with that, and then they'll struggle with their daily day-to-day chores as well, if that's gonna is the case. Because some of our volunteers, well, one of our volunteers is a bit of is a second language to her. So we need to make sure that the instructions are very clear for her. So and I find, even if I've been here for over 45 years, but still I find other things in the IT department a bit tough to understand, and phones and gadgets are not my best. How can I say? I'm not best at them.
Yeah.
So I don't understand the people will go through the same situation, because if I can't understand, and then many of us, like I said, will not understand. So I mean, your sites looks quite clear the way you have created yours. The one I just seen, I think Felicity.
Yeah.
It's quite easy. Nice to read clear instructions. It's very important. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. No, that's what we were going for. I think that's why we pulled so many people into all these workshops to try and design the page, and then we got Scott on board to help us out. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
I think there's we always do the dad test, and it's usually Chris's dad actually. The dad test, but he's getting pretty good now. So
Yeah.
you have to
find someone else, David. Yeah. I always say nobody sort of always use the example. Nobody really teaches to use some of these online platforms. If you think of the likes of Meta or Facebook, Twitter, things like this, no one really teaches you how to use them. The UX itself lends itself to be very user friendly. So if you can't find something, you can generally find it within a couple of clicks, and that proves some really good design work normally.
Yeah, I agree. Any other questions? Final questions? Okay.
Great.
No further questions.